The ravens were restless. They skirled in black circles over Winterfell's broken towers, a ragged crown of wings and noise against a gray northern sky. Snow fell in small, dry flakes, too light to settle yet, as if winter were tasting the air before it bit down. From the battlements, Sansa Stark watched them wheel and cry, their shadows sliding over the yard below. Men shouted, horses snorted steam. Steel rang as it met steel in practice yards, and in the kennels the hounds set up a barking that rose and fell like a tide. Yet beneath it all she felt something else, a thread of unease that hummed in stone and snow and bone. Winterfell remembers, she thought. It always does. She drew her cloak tighter around her throat. The white fur lining brushed her jaw, soft, warm, smelling faintly of cedar. Robb's cloak had been heavier than this, she remembered. Father's darker. Jon's was threadbare when he'd been just her half-brother, before he was a king in the north, before the banners had risen and fallen and risen again. Now he was gone, riding south to plead with a dragon queen for the fate of the world, while winter closed its jaws around the north. And Sansa was here, holding stone and name and memory together with both hands. "My lady," she turned. Brienne of Tarth stood a pace behind her, sword at hip, great blue eyes narrowed slightly against the cold. Snow spotted the woman's broad shoulders. Her hair, once cropped short, had grown just enough to curl damply at her neck. "Lord Glover's men have arrived," Brienne said. "They're in the yard, demanding to speak with you. Not Maester Wolken, not even Lord Royce, only you." Sansa's lips twitched. "Demanding? Yes, my lady." "I suppose it would be too much to hope they're bringing good news?" Brienne gave a minute shake of her head. "They look like men who've ridden long and slept little. Angry men. Of course they are. Men are always angriest when they're afraid." Sansa gave the ravens one last glance. They were still shrieking, beating at the gray sky as if it had offended them personally. "Very well," she said. "Let's not keep them waiting." She descended the tower steps with Brienne at her shoulder, feeling the cold seeping deeper with every turn of the spiral. Winterfell stones were familiar under her gloved hand, the grooves worn by Stark hands down the centuries. When she closed her eyes, she could almost see them, shadows layered on shadows. Kings of winter in black fur, gray-eyed maidens in wool, children racing through these halls long before the Targaryens had dreamed of dragons. "We were here before them all," she thought. "We'll be here after, if we're clever, if we're strong, if we're very, very lucky." In the yard below, men were dismounting. Their cloaks were crusted with frost and road dirt, their beards rimed white. Lord Glover himself stood at their head, broad-shouldered and ruddy, his hair iron gray beneath his fur hood. He bowed because he had to, but the movement was curt. "Lady Stark," he said. "Lord Glover," Sansa answered, letting the title rest on her tongue. Tasted like iron and snow. There were others behind him. A Karstark banner, white sunburst on black. Manderleys in their sea-green cloaks. The flayed man of the Dreadfort, now carried by grim-faced men who would have served Ramsay Bolton once and were now sworn to her. All the north clustered here in this frozen yard, and more besides spread from White Harbor to Castle Black. Waiting, watching, judging. Bad news should not linger in the throat, her mother had once told her. Spit it out quickly, before it rots you from within. "Speak," Sansa said. "What has happened?" Glover's jaw clenched. "The dead," he said. "They've broken through the last wildling villages past the wall. More ravens came from Castle Black. Fewer from Eastwatch. Now they've stopped altogether." A murmur went through the yard. Even the horses shifted uneasily. "We know this already," Sansa said. King Jon told us. He saw them on the ice marching. That's why he's gone south. To bring back the dragonglass. And he left us to face the storm while he chases tales of dragons," Glover snapped. "Yet that's not what I came to say." He stepped closer, his breath fogging between them. "There are tales, my lady. Stories of what rides with them. Not just corpses, not just wights, spirits, wolves and bears made of frost and hate." shadows in the snow that eat men's hearts before their bodies fall. Sansa's skin crawled. Old wives' tales. There are no old wives left in those villages, Glover said. Only bones. Ask your own men at Last Hearth. Ask the Umbers. They've seen things that don't belong in a world made by gods or men. Brienne shifted at her side. Sansa heard the soft scrape of leather as the knight's hand moved nearer her sword. You came to frighten us? Sansa said. You've ridden hard through winter to share ghost stories? I came to say the North is not ready, Glover growled. Our men are brave. They'll die in the snow with swords in their hands, if they must. But steel is not enough, not against this. We need something else. Old magic. The kind the first men had, when they first knelt to the children of the forest and bound their souls to the land. The words struck something deep inside her. Something that had been humming quietly since she'd come home to Winterfell. Old magic. The ravens shrieked above them, as if in answer. What would you have me do? Sansa asked. Summon the children from their hiding places? Ask Bran to open his eyes and mend the world. The mention of her brother, not the boy he had been, but the strange, distant creature he was becoming, made the hairs rise on her arms. We would have the North led by its true blood, Glover said. By wolves in truth, not just in name. We would have what our grandfathers spoke of by the fireside. A Stark who can call the land to war, who can make the forests fight the S. Now itself burn. His gaze sharpened. The last time such a one walked, she was called the Wolf Queen. Your ancestor. Sansa blinked. At her side, Brienne drew in a breath. I've never heard of her, Sansa said. If she ever existed, the songs have forgotten her. Songs are for Southrons and summer children, Glover said. The North remembers in other ways. He reached inside his cloak and drew something out, wrapped in oiled leather. For a moment Sansa tensed. Steel? A letter? But when he unfolded it, she saw only parchment, cracked and yellowed. Found in my father's chests, he said. Old even when he was a boy, a fragment of an older story. I brought it because I did not know where else to take it. He held it out. Brienne moved subtly, interposing herself between them, but Sansa only lifted her hand. It's safe, Glover said. Words only. No spells I know of, at least. There was a dry humor in that last, but it did nothing to ease the tightness in Sansa's chest. She took the parchment. The ink had faded almost to brown, the script a tight, crabbed hand in the northern style. She could make out only snatches. When the snows came red and the dead wore crowns of ice, the eldest daughter of Brandon Stark, called the White Wolf, she bound her blood to the roots of the great trees, and they howled with her voice. From her we take the words, from her we take the vow. Sansa swallowed. The air seemed colder suddenly, each breath a small knife in her lungs. What vow? She asked. Glover pointed. At the bottom of the page, nearly lost in a smear of old wax, a line of words wound like a trail of ants. She raised a kingdom of wolves from winter's heart, he said quietly. A realm beneath the realm. So long as her blood endured, so too would the North. A kingdom beneath the realm. Something in the stones hummed again, deep and low, like a wolf's growl buried under miles of snow. Sansa folded the parchment carefully and slid it into her glove, against her wrist. The paper was so dry it felt as if it might crumble at a breath. Thank you, Lord Glover, she said. You were right to bring this to me. Rest your men. Eat, drink, warm yourselves. We will speak again tonight, when I've had time to consider. There's not much time left, Glover muttered. But he bowed, more deeply than before, and trudged away, barking orders to his men. In the silence that followed, Brienne said, Do you believe him? Sansa watched the men scatter toward the warm promise of the hall. Above, the ravens clawed at the sky. I believe the dead are coming, she said. I believe steel and courage won't be enough. And I believe the North remembers more than it says. What will you do? Sansa looked toward the Godswood, where the heart tree's white branches rose over the walls, stark and skeletal against the sky. "I'm going to ask an old friend," she said. "Or an old enemy. I'm not sure which it is anymore." Brienne's brows knit. "You mean Bran?" Sansa nodded. "Stay close, but not too close. If the old tales are true, we might be walking in deeper snow than either of us has seen." Bran sat beneath the heart tree with his eyes closed, as he often did now. The roots twisted around his thin legs like pale serpents. His breath steamed softly in the cold. The carved face in the weirwood watched him with bleeding eyes. The godswood was quiet otherwise. No sound of the yard, no clang of steel. Just the faint creak of branches, the whisper of snow on bark. Sansa stepped onto the mossy ground and felt the silence fold around her like a cloak. She had always been a little afraid of this place. As a child, she had come here dutifully with her family, knelt before the old gods, traced the lines of the face with her eyes. But even then she had felt like an intruder, like a singer who did not know the words of the song she was meant to sing. Now the feeling was stronger. The weirwood's red eyes seemed to move, tracking her. Brienne waited at the edge of the clearing, as Sansa had asked. Her hand rested loosely on her sword hilt, as if steel would do any good here. Sansa crossed the last few paces alone. "Bran," she said. His eyes opened. They were not her brother's eyes. Not holy. The color was the same gray, but there was a depth in them now that made her feel as if she were standing at the edge of an endless well, peering down. "Sansa," he said. His voice was soft, distant. "You've come." Emotion flared in her chest. Anger, grief, tenderness all at once. "I'm your sister," she said. "Where else would I be?" "You weren't always," Bran said. "Once you were a little bird. Once you were a lady in a lion's den. Once you were a wolf who forgot her own name." Her jaw clenched. "And what am I now?" "That depends," Bran said, "on what you choose to be." She took a slow breath, tasting the iron tang of the weirwood's sap on the air. "Lord Glover brought me something," she said. She pulled the parchment from her glove and held it out. Bran did not reach for it. His gaze flicked over it, and she felt the odd sensation that the air between them, the very space, had tightened. "I know this," he said. "You've seen it." "I've seen her." Bran's eyes slid past her, to a place only he could see. The Wolf Queen, Brandon's daughter. Some called her Liara the Snow, others the White Wolf. She was the first of our line to bind herself fully to the land. Sansa's heart thudded. What does that mean? Most Starks were touched by the old gifts, sensitive to the land, able to feel the moods of sky and stone. Some could walk in the skins of beasts, see through the weirwoods. She went further. How? Bran's lips thinned. By choice, by sacrifice. His gaze met hers again, and for a moment she saw her little brother there, the boy who had climbed the walls and laughed when he fell into snowdrifts. "Why do you ask, Sansa?" She thought of the dead marching, of ravens screaming, of men with haunted eye. Speaking of shadows in the snow, she thought of Jon riding south, leaving the north in her hands. "I'm tired of being too late," she said, surprising herself with the fierceness in her own voice. "Tired of hearing about threats when they're already at our door. We wait for dragons in the south. We wait for the Night King in the north. We wait for men to decide what will happen to us. I'm tired of waiting." Bran watched her without blinking. "Glover says she raised a kingdom," Sansa went on, the words tumbling out now. "A realm beneath the realm. A wolf kingdom. He thinks the north survived dark winters because she bound our blood to the land. That as long as her blood endures, so does the north. I don't know if that's true. I don't even know if it's possible. But if there's a chance, you'd take it," Bran said. "For the north," Sansa said. "For our people? Yes. And for yourself?" She hesitated. "I won't lie and say I want nothing. I want the north strong. I want Winterfell safe. I want to never kneel to another southerner's whim. If there is a power that can help me keep my people alive, I'll use it, even if it frightens me." Bran nodded slowly. You've learned more than I thought, little bird. She almost smiled. I've learned it's unwise to fly into a hunter's mouth and call it a song. A flicker of something that might have been pride ghosted across his face. The spellbook isn't here, he said. Not as words. Not anymore. Her fingers tightened around the parchment. But it existed? Yes. Once it lay in a chest under your great-great-grandfather's bed, wrapped in wolf fur. Once it sat on a shelf in the solar, forgotten between ledgers and old ballads. Once it burned in a fire when a lord of Winterfell decided that such things brought too much trouble down on his house. Bran's eyes unfocused, watching the past burn. But it doesn't end there. Words are stubborn things. Magic even more so. I don't understand. You will. Bran lifted one thin hand. Give me your palm. She hesitated only a heartbeat before stripping off her glove and holding out her hand. Cold bit her skin, making her fingers ache. Bran's touch was light as snowflakes. He turned her palm upward, studying the lines as if they were rivers on a map. The Wolf Queen wrote in blood and sap and shadow, he murmured. She carved spells into bone, whispered them into snowdrifts, etched them into the rings of trees. The book was only a reflection. The real spell is written in the north itself. Sansa swallowed. Can it be read? Yes, Bran said. By one who can hear the land's voice and answer it. By one who carries her blood and is willing to pay her price. What price? Sansa asked. He looked up. The wind shifted, making the weirwood branches creak. If you take this path, he said slowly, you will never be only yourself again. The land will live in you. The wolves will live in you. Their hunger, their fury, their loyalty. It will make you strong. It will make you terrible. And it will ask always for more. More what? More of you. His gaze was very clear now, very human. You will not think with one mind but with many. In battle, that will be a gift. In peace, it will be complicated. Sansa thought of Cersei Lannister, all bright poison and sharp edges, and of the small council with its squabbling old men. She thought of Littlefinger with his whispers and nets. They had all wanted control, every piece on the board moving just as they willed. But this would be different. This would not be control over other people. It would be a bond with something older and wilder than any king's law. Will I still be me? She asked quietly. That depends on how strong you are, Bran said. And how well you remember your own name when the pack is howling. Snowflakes clung to his lashes. He did not blink. You saw this, she said, didn't you? In your visions. I saw a woman in white furs standing beneath this tree, Bran said. Wolves all around her, living and dead, their eyes like stars. I saw dead men breaking on stone and root and fong. I saw the north rise, a single great beast with 10,000 hearts, his mouth compressed. Sometimes I saw her face, and it was yours. Sometimes it was someone else's. Sometimes there was no face at all, only a crown of antlers made of ice. Sansa shivered. You're not making this sound very inviting. Power never comes wrapped in singing birds and lemon cakes, Bran said. You knew that long before you came home. She thought of Joffrey's smile, of Ramsay's hands, of Tyrion's gentler gaze in a world that would not allow it, of Olenna Tyrell's knowing smirk. She had learned, painfully and thoroughly, what power cost when you had none. Perhaps it was time to learn the other side. What must I do? She asked. Bran studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her heart on some invisible scale. Go down, he said at last. Deeper than the crypts, deeper than the foundations. There is a place below Winterfell where the stone remembers things even I can barely see. The Wolf Queen's first working was done there, before there was a book, before there were words for what she did. How do I find it? The same way she did. Bran smiled faintly. You follow the wolves. The crypts of Winterfell smelled of cold stone, old dust, and iron. Sansa moved between the rows of stone kings and lords, their gray faces stern, their stone direwolves curled at their feet. Torches guttered in their brackets. casting the dead Stark's shadows long and wavering. When she had been a child, these halls had frightened her. Now they felt almost comforting. The dead were honest, at least. They did not pretend to love you while plotting your ruin. They did not smile and lie and call it courtesy. Her footsteps echoed softly. Behind her, at a respectful distance, came Brienne and Podrick. She had not wanted to bring them, but even a wolf queen in the making, if that's WH. As she was, did not walk alone into deep darkness without a sword at her back. "You're certain of this, my lady?" Brienne asked, her voice low. "No," Sansa said, "but I'm certain that doing nothing will kill us faster." They reached the lowest level, where the air was colder and older. The faces of the stone Starks here were worn almost smooth by time. Names carved on their pedestals were half-faded. Torrhen, who had bent the knee to Aegon. Theon Stark from long centuries past. Direwolves whose snouts had chipped away. Sansa stopped before the statue of Lyanna Stark, as she often did. The stone girl's face was stern, unyielding, more like Arya's than Sansa's. Jon's mother, she thought. My aunt. The woman the songs turned into a prize, a maiden to be stolen and mourned, while men used her memory to justify their wars. "I'm sorry," Sansa murmured, not sure if she spoke to Lyanna, to Jon, or to herself. "Do you hear something?" Podrick asked suddenly. They all went still. At first Sansa heard only her own breath, the faint crackle of torch flame. Then, beneath it, a sound like soft claws on stone. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, coming from deeper in the dark, beyond the edge of the torchlight. Brienne's sword hissed from its sheath. Podrick lifted his own blade, though the young man's knuckles were pale. A shape emerged from the shadows, small, low to the ground, eyes gleaming in the torchlight. Sansa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Lady," she whispered. The direwolf stepped into the light, her coat the soft gray of storm clouds, her eyes a clear, uncanny gold. She had grown since Sansa had last truly known her, in that other life before King's Landing, before everything. Then she had been all paws and clumsy enthusiasm, bounding after Sansa in the God's Wood, ears too big for her head. Now she moved with the silent, lethal grace of a creature born to snow and blood. "Is that?" Podrick began. Brienne's eyes widened just a fraction. "I thought she was dead." "So did I," Sansa said softly. Her throat tightened. The last time she had seen Lady, the wolf had held still under Lord Stark's hand, trusting even to the end. Sansa had watched, frozen, as the sword rose and fell. She had heard the wet sound it made, had smelled blood and fear. She had never stopped hearing it. Yet here Lady stood, flesh and fur, breathing slow and steady, the plumes of her breath ghosting the cold air. She's a ghost, Sansa thought, or a dream, or something stranger still. Lady padded forward until she stood directly before Sansa. She lifted her head, snuffled at Sansa's hand, then licked her fingers. The tongue was warm and real, just as Sansa remembered. An ache opened in her chest, so sharp it was almost pain. "Good girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh, my good girl." Lady bumped her head against Sansa's thigh, then turned. Without looking back, she padded deeper into the shadows. Sansa hesitated only a moment. "Stay here," she told Brienne and Podrick. "Guard this passage. If anything comes out that isn't me..." She trailed off, then shook her head. "You'll know." "My lady," Brienne began. "Brienne." Sansa met the knight's eyes. "If this is to work, I have to walk it alone." Brienne's jaw clenched, but she nodded. "I'll be here," she said, "whatever comes." Sansa stepped away from the torchlight and followed the wolf into the dark. The air grew colder, the stone underfoot slick with some faint sheen of moisture. There were no more torches here, no carved faces. The light faded quickly behind her, until the world narrowed to the soft glow of Lady's eyes and the whisper of her paws. After a time, Sansa could not say how long, she began to see faint glimmers on the walls. Lines, curves, shallow grooves cut into the stone and filled with something that caught the scant light and held it. She reached out, fingers brushing one. It was smooth and cold, like ice that never melted. Runes, she realized. Old ones. Older than the Maester's books, older than the songs. Marks made when the first men still warred against the children, when the North was a wild thing half-tamed. She could not read them, not yet, but they hummed under her touch, like strings on a harp. Lady stopped at last in a small, circular chamber, little more than a bubble in the stone. The ceiling was low enough that Sansa had to duck slightly. The floor was bare rock, smoothed by ages. In the center, a shallow depression held a thin pool of water, its surface still and black as polished obsidian. Lady lay down beside it, curling her tail around her paws, her golden eyes fixed on Sansa. Sansa knelt by the pool. The air here felt thick, as if she were breathing through wool. Her heart beat too loud in her chest. She leaned forward and looked at her reflection. A woman's face looked back, pale, with copper hair braided in the northern style, loose strands escaping to frame her cheeks. Her eyes were clear winter blue. There was a fine line between her brows now that had not been there when she left Winterfell the first time. The years had carved it there with knives of loss and learning. Is this enough? She wondered. Is this face enough to stand against the dead? The water trembled. For a moment, another face flickered over hers. A woman with hair white as snow and eyes like chips of ice, furs draped over her shoulders, a crown of bone on her brow. Sansa flinched back, heart pounding. The water stilled. "All right?" she whispered into the cold. "All right, show me. If this is what the North needs, show me." She cut her palm on the small knife she kept at her belt. A quick, shallow slice. The pain was sharp, clean. A bright bead of blood welled up. She held her hand over the pool and let the blood fall. 1 drop, 2, 3. The water swallowed it without a ripple. Nothing happened. Sansa waited, breath steaming. Her heart thudded. Then, slowly, the water began to glow. It was faint at first, a ghost of light at the very bottom of the pool. Then it grew, climbing upward like dawn spreading through a dark sky. The light was not white or yellow or blue. It was the gray of wolf fur, the silver of moonlight on snow, the green of pine needles, all at once. Runes on the walls flared, the lines filling with cold fire. They wrapped around the chamber like a script, spiraling inward. Sansa's breath caught. Her head swam. The light reached the surface of the water and rose, forming a pale mist that coiled and thickened. Shapes moved within it, trees, mountains, rivers. Wolves. Hundreds of wolves, their forms made of shadow and light, running over snowy hills. Their howls a sound she felt in her bones rather than heard with her ears. The mist surged outward, enveloping her. She gasped as cold sank into her skin, into her bones, into the very marrow of who she was. It was not the chilling emptiness of the dead, she realized dimly. It was the bite of deep winter, all teeth and claws and clear air. It hurt, but it was a living hurt. Images flooded her. She saw the wall, a white knife across the world, its top crowded with black-clad men staring north with hollow eyes. She saw the dead, marching, not slow and shambling as tales said, but steady, relentless, their movements as inexorable as the turning of seasons. Their eyes burned blue, a terrible, quiet flame. She saw things that weren't men at all. Hulking shapes with antlers of bone, spiders as big as horses, shadows that slithered over snow, leaving nothing living in their wake. She saw the North, every tree and stone, every hill and river. She saw men huddled in crofts, women stirring pots over thin fires, children whispering stories in the dark to keep their fear at bay. She saw wolves. They were everywhere like a thread woven through the land. Gray wolves, white wolves, black wolves, red-furred ones with ears torn in old battles. Packs running through forests, lone wolves padding over frozen lakes. Half-starved creatures nosing through midden heaps at the edge of villages. Their eyes turned, one by one, to her. Not just those alive now. Shadows moved behind them. Wolves from long winters past, their bones lying under snow and stone. Wolves that had run beside the first Starks, that had guarded kings and children, that had died in battle and in bed and under swords wielded by men who feared what they could not control. They all looked at her, and beneath them, deeper still, something older stirred. A great shape, impossible to see in entirety, as if the north itself were lifting its head from slumber. A voice, not quite words, more a feeling, rolled through her. Pack? Sansa's throat closed. Yes, she thought. The word did not cross her lips. It echoed from her heart, out through all the paths the magic had opened. Yes, Pack, mine. The sensation that came in response was like being nuzzled by a dozen snouts at once. Warm fur against her skin, hot breath, the weight of bodies pressing close. Comfort and demand, love and hunger all tangled. The mist tightened around her. The runes flared brighter. More images. The Wolf Queen, Liara the Snow, standing where Sansa knelt now. Her hair was white, though she looked no older than 30. Her eyes were as cold and clear as the heart of winter. Blood smeared her forearms to the elbows. Wolves ringed her, their fur bristling. She spoke words in a language Sansa did not know, and yet somehow understood. Words that were less about meaning and more about binding. Blood to snow, snow to bone, bone to root, root to heart, heart to howl. One pack, one land, one winter. The magic in the air shuddered. Lines traced themselves in Sansa's mind, connecting places and hearts, weaving a net no sword could cut. Liara turned to look at her. Their eyes met across centuries. Careful, the Wolf Queen said, though her lips did not move. The land loves its own. It will hold you as tightly as any chain. Sansa straightened her spine. I've worn other chains, she thought. I learned to slip them. I've learned what I will not endure again. Liara's lips curved, just slightly. Then she stepped forward, mist swirling, and walked into Sansa. Cold crashed through Sansa's body. For a moment there was nothing but pain, the kind that felt like breaking and mending at once. Her bones burned. Her blood turned to ice and then to fire. She screamed. The sound echoed, not just in the chamber but in the unseen spaces between things. Ravens cried out over Winterfell. Wolves howled in distant forests. Men looked up from their fires, shivering, with no idea why. Images roared through her. Battlefields stained red and white, children born and named, treaties sworn, betrayals made, winters that lasted years, summers quick and green. Through it all ran the wolves, their paws leaving prints in blood and snow. Then, as suddenly as it had crashed over her, the pain receded. Sansa collapsed to her knees, panting. The stone floor was cold under her palms. Lady's warm flank pressed against her side, steady and solid. Sansa, a voice said softly. She looked up. For a moment she thought she saw someone standing on the far side of the pool, a woman in white furs, with a crown of bone and a cloak of living wolves. Then the light shifted, and she realized she was looking at her own reflection in the slowly dimming water. Her eyes glowed faintly, a pale silver that faded as she watched, leaving only her usual blue. Yet something lingered there, a depth that had not been there before. She could feel the north, not as a clear picture, not like Bran's visions. It was more like a pressure at the back of her mind, a constant awareness. A storm building along the eastern coast, a pack of wolves running near the wolfswood, their paws striking frozen earth, a hunter's arrow flying true toward a doe. The dead moving, slow and relentless, their presence like cold mold creeping under a door. Pack, she whispered. A dozen distant howls answered. Lady's tail thumped once against the stone. Sansa got to her feet. Her body felt strange, as if it no longer ended at her skin. Thank you, she said into the silence. She wasn't sure if she spoke to Liara, to the land, to the wolves, or to herself. Then she turned and walked back toward the dim glow of the torches and the waiting world. The days that followed were different. At first, Sansa thought the ritual had left her nothing but exhaustion and strange dreams. Wolves prowled through her sleep, their eyes bright. She dreamed of roots twisting under snow, of bones stacked like kindling, of a crown made of antlers and fangs that weighed nothing and everything. But when she woke, she found the differences lingering. Voices sounded clearer. She could hear the tremor under Lord Serwyn's words when he spoke of sending his youngest son to the wall. She could hear the stubborn steel in Lady Manderley's voice when she insisted on keeping her ships close to White Harbor, no matter what the king in the north might command from afar. Smells were sharper. She could taste the faint tang of fear in the hall when talk turned to the dead. She could smell a lie, not as a sulphurous reek, nothing so clear, but as a sour twist under a man's usual scent. And always, beneath it all, the land thrummed. Sometimes it was a faint murmur, like distant thunder. Sometimes it was a sharp jolt, a tree cracking under ice, a cliff collapsing into the sea. She could close her eyes and know where the snow lay thin and where it crusted thick. She could sense rivers, slow and black under ice. She knew, without being told, when a small croft half a league from Winterfell's walls lost its last goat to cold and hunger, and despair settled over the family like a shroud. It was overwhelming. She spent one long night pacing her chambers, hands pressed to her temples, trying not to drown in it all. Lady curled by the hearth, watching with luminous eyes. I asked for this, Sansa reminded herself. For strength, for a way to protect them. If power was a knife, then this was a pack of blades, all of them pointed in different directions. She had to learn how to hold them. She started small. When a boy brought a message from Deepwood Motte, frozen and shaking, she had hot broth and blankets waiting before he even reached the hall. She had felt his approach, a small, shivering flicker moving along the line of the old King's Road. When one of the Glover men lied about how much grain his lord had sent, the man's words smooth, his face composed. She could feel the twist of guilt in him, a worm burrowing under his ribs. She did not call him out in the hall, did not shame him before his fellows. Instead, she invited him to her solar lair, offered him wine, and asked quietly why he thought deception would help anyone with winter coming. The man broke into tears and confessed everything. His lord had ordered him to steal a third of the grain back. Glover feared his own people would starve if he gave so much. Sansa listened. She thought of the Wolf Queen's vow echoing in her head. One pack. You should have come to me, she said. We are not Boltons. I will not flay you for speaking truth. She ordered the grain returned, but she sent another cart north as well, filled with blankets and salted fish from stores she had not expected to uncover in Winterfell's forgotten cellars. A hidden cache that had revealed itself to her like a toothache in stone. Glover came in person a week later, knelt in the hall, and swore an oath that rang true in the strange new way her ears had. Forgive me, my lady, he said. I forgot that wolves share meat, even when it's scarce. Don't forget again, Sansa said, but she smiled thin and sharp. We can't afford it. And slowly, the North began to knit itself together. It wasn't magic alone that did it. Sansa still spent long hours in council, listening to petty grievances and complex feuds, weighing tribute and tithes. She still juggled pride and fear and old grudges. The letters to Jon still went out, carried by ravens whose wings grew tired of the path between Winterfell and Dragonstone. But when she looked at a map now, she did not just see ink on parchment. She saw veins and nerves. She felt distant hearts beating. Word spread as it always did. The Lady of Winterfell knows when you lie, some said. She calls wolves with a whisper, others said. I saw them, great gray shadows running behind her in the yard. They watched us like men. A Glover man swore she had stepped between two arguing lords and the very air had gone cold, frost forming on their beards. They had stopped shouting at once. A Manderley sailor told of seeing a pod of whales surface beside his ship in a storm, guiding them safely into harbor. Her doing, he insisted. Who else could it be? No man's god listens so quick. Sansa did not encourage such tales, but neither did she quash them completely. Fear could bind a people, but so could awe, and she would use whatever tools she had. Yet for all that, the dead kept coming. Ravens from the wall grew less frequent. their messages shorter and more frantic. When one arrived bearing only a scrap of parchment scorched at the edges, "They are here. We cannot," before the ink dissolved into a jagged line. Sansa felt a chill that had nothing to do with magic. She stood at the window of the great hall, watching snow fall, and felt the cold tide pressing against the world. "Jon," she whispered, though he was leagues away. "Hurry." He rode with a dragon queen now, if the tales were true. He had sent word of dragons in the sky, of a fortress by the sea where fire-breathing beasts nested. She had read the words with something like disbelief, though in a world where the dead walked and her own blood could call wolves, dragons did not seem so impossible. She might never see them, she realized, might never meet this Daenerys Targaryen who claimed to be their ally, then demanded Jon bend the knee. Might never see her brother again, if the storm reached them first. But the North was not helpless. On a night when the moon was a thin, sharp curve, Sansa walked to the Godswood alone. The heart tree watched her come, its red leaves shivering. She knelt in the snow, feeling the cold seep through her furs, through cloth and skin, into her bones. Lady lay beside her, head on her paws. "I need to see," Sansa said softly, "not just feel. Show me if you can. Show me what we face." She set her palm on a root. The bark was smooth and cold, faintly slick. Pain flared, not in her body but in something deeper. The world blurred. Snow. Endless snow, stretching to the horizon. A line of black ants moved across it, no men. Soldiers in black and gray and patches of brown, trudging along a path that vanished behind them under blowing drifts. At their head, a man with a dark beard and grim eyes, a sword at his hip. Tormund Giantsbane, she realized, Jon's wildling ally. His beard was more ice than hair now, his breath a constant plume. They walked toward a faint line in the distance, a crack in the world where ice met sea. Eastwatch, or what had been Eastwatch. The vision twisted. Time shuddered. The wall was broken there now. Jagged ice lay in heaps, glittering under a pale sun. A gap yawned, wide enough for an army. Through it marched the dead. Sansa's breath caught. Her heart hammered. She saw them more clearly than ever before. Their flesh was gray and pale, stretched thin over bone. Their armor was shattered remnants of countless armies, welded together with ice. Some still wore the black of the Watch. Others bore the faded sigils of houses long fallen. Their eyes burned blue, so cold, she thought. Fire turned to ice. Life turned inside out. At their head rode the Night King. He was taller than the men around him, his form lean and terrible. His armor looked grown rather than forged, ridges of ice and bone. His crown was a jagged thing like frozen antlers. His eyes were twin shards of winter's heart. He lifted his hand. The wind rose. Sansa felt it even through the vision, a gust of impossible cold. The snow around the broken wall surged up, twisting, forming shapes, wolves, bears, things with too many legs. They were made of ice and snow and the shadows of the dead. Their eyes glowed the same blue. Spirits, she thought. The old tales. Frost wolves that hunt souls. Glover was right. The army moved south. The vision snapped back. Sansa reeled, her hand tearing away from the root. She fell into the snow, panting. Lady whined softly and pressed closer, her warmth an anchor. "They're coming," Sansa whispered to the dark. "They're truly coming." She could feel them now, a cold stain spreading through the fabric of the land. Slow, unstoppable. The Wolf Queen's magic had tied her to the north, but the north itself was being eaten piece by piece. "Then meet them," a voice whispered in her mind. It sounded like Liara, like Bran, like the wind through bare branches. Not as a lamb, as a wolf. Sansa pushed herself to her feet. "Send word to every lord," she told Maester Wolkan the next morning. "Every village head, every clan chief. The dead are marching. We don't have weeks. We may not have days." "They won't all come," Royce said bluntly. "Some will hunker down in their halls, hoping to be overlooked. Some will think this is Southern panic. that the tales of monsters are exaggerated. Then we remind them, Sansa said. We remind them who they are, and who leads them. How? Lady Manderly asked, pale brows arching. With letters? With threats? Sansa met her gaze steadily. With a howl, she said. They assembled in the yard. Men and women from half a dozen houses, the rest riding hard to arrive before the storm. Glover and Serwyn, Manderly, Hornwood, White Knife fishermen, mountain clan folk in patched furs, even a handful of skirling, hard-eyed umbers. They looked tired, wary, suspicious. Many had left their people behind under heavy guard. Some had not wanted to come at all. They stood now in a rough semicircle, breath steaming, eyes on Sansa. Brienne stood behind her, a solid presence. Royce and Manderly flanked her. Above, on the battlements, archers watched with their bows unstrung. More a sign of vigilance than threat. Lady stood beside Sansa, her fur brushing Sansa's cloak. You've all heard the tales, Sansa began. Her voice carried clearly in the cold air. You've heard of dragon queens and broken walls, of dead men marching with eyes of ice. You've heard my brother's letters. Some of you have believed, some have not. A few men shifted, exchanging glances. I cannot make you believe with words, Sansa said. The South is full of words, honeyed, poisoned, dripping from tongues like venom. I learned that lesson well. She let the memory of King's Landing's heat and noise flash through her, its gold and filth. It lent steel to her tongue. I can only show you what I know, she said, what the North itself knows. She stepped forward, to the center of the yard. The land thrummed under her boots. She drew off her gloves, baring her hands to the cold. The wind bit at her skin. Her breath steamed. I am Sansa Stark, she said, daughter of Eddard and Catelyn, blood of Winterfell. I have been a hostage and a wife, a pawn and a prize. I have been power's victim. Her voice hardened. No longer. She opened herself. It was not a matter of words or gestures. The spell was in her now, and in the land, in the old vows whispered in a forgotten tongue. She had only to choose. She chose. The world rushed in. She felt every stone in Winterfell's walls, every tree in the godswood, every fire from the great hall to the meanest cookstove. Beyond, she felt the land stretching away. Forests and hills, rivers and frozen bogs, villages huddled under snow, wolves running through the shadows. They all pricked up their ears at once. Sansa tilted her head back and drew in a breath that tasted of iron and pine. She howled. The sound tore from her not as a practiced thing, but as a truth that had lain coiled in her since the first time she had seen her father's banner unfurl, since the first time she had stroked Lady's fur. It was not a human sound. It rolled through the yard like thunder, rising and falling, wild and fierce and lonely and full. Men flinched, horses screamed and danced. Brienne's hand tightened on her sword hilt, eyes wide. The howl seemed to go on forever, threading through stone and ice, echoing down into the crypts, up into the sky. And the North answered. Wolves' voices rose from the woods around Winterfell, close and far, high and low, dozens, hundreds. The sound rolled over the walls in a wave. From the village beyond the gates, dogs joined in, their lesser voices weaving under the wolves. In distant crofts, hounds threw back their heads and bayed. On lonely hills, lone wolves lifted their voices to the stars. The sound carried and carried, bound to Sansa's howl by threads of cold fire. Men in the yard stared around, mouths open. Some made the sign of the old gods on their chests. The ground stirred. Snow in the yard puffed up, shaken by something below. For a breathless moment Sansa thought she had gone too far, had called the dead instead. Then wolves stepped out of the shadows. They emerged from under the gatehouse, from behind wagons, from the edges of the godswood. Some were lean and scarred, their ribs showing. Others were thick-furred, their eyes bright. They moved with a unity that made the hairs rise on the back of every neck. They ringed the yard, pressing close but not attacking. Their eyes were on Sansa. At their head stood a great gray wolf, larger than any natural beast. Her fur silvered with frost, her eyes molten gold. Lady had grown in more ways than one. Power rippled off her like heat. Sansa felt the gaze of every man and woman on her. Their fear, their awe. "This is the North," she said, her voice rough from the howl. "Not just stone and snow, not just names in ledgers and lines on maps. We are wolves. We are pack. The dead come to break us, to turn us into them. I say no." She lifted her chin. The Wolf Queen's words rose from some deep place, translated by her own tongue. "Blood to snow," she said. "Snow to bone, bone to root, root to heart, heart to howl. One pack, one land, one winter. Swear it with me." Silence. Then, softly at first, then louder voices joined hers. "Blood to snow," Glover growled, his hand clenched on his sword hilt. "Snow to bone," Lady Manderly said, fierce despite her bulk. "Bone to root," muttered an Umber youth, eyes wide. "Root to heart," Royce intoned. "Heart to howl," Brienne said, surprising herself. "One pack," they all said. "One land, one winter." The words hung in the air, not just as sound but as something heavier. Sansa felt them sink into the stone, into the snow, into the hearts of the men and women before her. Lines drew themselves in her mind, connecting each of them to each other, to the wolves around them, to the land under their boots. The Wolf Kingdom stirred. Power washed through her, not as a single flood but as many small streams converging. She staggered. Lady pressed against her leg, steadying her. "Look north," Sansa said, breathless. "Close your eyes. Feel it. They're coming. Not stories, not songs. Dead men and worse. Every child's nightmare made real. They did." She watched their faces change. Even those who had doubted stiffened, eyes widening. A shudder ran through the yard as they all, for a moment, felt the cold tide pressing against the wall. They saw in some small way what she had seen. Blue fire eyes, frost wolves, shadows that ate light. When they opened their eyes again, there was no doubt left, only fear and determination. "The Wolf Kingdom is not a crown and a throne," Sansa said, voice low. "It is a promise. We fight as one or we die as many. We share food, we share fire, we share blood on the snow. No more hoarding behind thick walls while neighbors starve. No more old grudges when the enemy does not know our names and does not care. The dead will not spare Serwyn because they hate Umbers more. They will not skip White Harbor because Manderlys once fed their people fish." There was a ripple of dark humor at that, quickly swallowed. "Stand with me," Sansa said. "Stand with Winterfell. Stand with the North itself. Be part of the pack." Silence stretched. Then Glover stepped forward. He went to one knee in the snow. "I broke faith once," he said hoarsely, "when I would not ride for Jon Snow against Ramsay Bolton. I won't break it again, not with the dead at our door." He looked up at her with eyes like chips of flint. "I am yours, my lady. My men, my land, my blood. Yours and the North's." Lady Manderly followed, surprisingly graceful as she knelt. "White Harbor stands with Winterfell," she said. "We always have. We always will. I'll turn my cooks to making soup for every soul who reaches our docks, and my sailors to ferrying grain wherever you say. The Donagers, the Locks, the Hornwoods. Fetch them all. If they don't come, we'll remind them." One by one they knelt, lords and ladies, warriors and maesters. Even a few hard-faced small folk dropped to their knees, hands fisted in the snow. Sansa looked at them, at the wolves around them, at the walls of Winterfell behind them. For a moment she saw another image laid over the scene. The Wolf Queen standing in a yard very like this, but smaller, with fewer faces, the wolves leaner, the snow dirtier with ash. It was the same binding, repeated across centuries with different names and clothes. Not the same, Sansa thought suddenly. "Mine. This is mine." She did not kneel. She stood, a slight figure in furs, hair like a banner in the wind. "Rise," she said. "There's work to do." If the dead had hoped to find a scattered, fearful north, they were disappointed. Messages flew, borne on ravens whose wings were guided by unseen currents Sansa could now sense. Fires were lit wrong, some said, in patterns that made the land itself take notice. Wolves carried news in their own way, running from holdfast to holdfast, their presence a sign that Winterfell's will had reached that far. At Sansa's order, caches of food were established along likely routes of retreat and battle. Not just in lordly halls, but in caves, hollow trees, old barrows. The land told her where such places lay, and she listened. She sent instructions for how to freeze meat properly, how to stretch grain without weakening men. Maester Wolkan and the elderly cooks muttered over the odd recipes, but they followed them. People listened, not because she was a Stark, though that helped, but because word had spread of the day the wolves had come to Winterfell at her call. Bands of rangers moved out not to fight the dead alone. She forbade that, but to map the land, to find choke points, rivers that could be used as barriers, hills where fires could signal. They carried with them charms made of weirwood shavings bound in leather, small things that made the dead hesitate, just long enough to matter. Sansa did not craft those herself. The children of the forest were gone from the north, if they had ever truly been there in more than tales. But the land remembered them, and through it she remembered a little of what they had known. She woke one morning with the image of a pattern in her mind. Lines and circles carved in wood, hung over doors. When such charms were made and placed, she could feel them prickle when something wrong passed by, like splinters under skin. Her power grew, not in great leaps but in steady increments. The more the people of the north bound themselves to the Wolf Kingdom's vow, the stronger the net of connection became. When a child in a village near Last Hearth fell into a frozen river and his mother's scream tore from her throat, Sansa heard it as a sharp sting in her own chest. She gasped, staggered, and without knowing how, sent a pushback along that line. Hold, breathe. The child's father, never knowing why, threw himself onto the ice without a plan, trusting to something that hummed in his blood. He dragged the boy out before the river sealed over again. The boy coughed, spat water, and lived. On another day, when a handful of men thought to abandon their posts and flee south, Sansa tasted their fear like bile. She did not invade their minds, that felt wrong, a violation like those she herself had suffered. But she let them feel, for a moment, the warmth of their hearths, the weight of their wives' hands, the sound of their children's laughter. They turned back, ashamed. Not every push worked. She could not save everyone. Each death on the borders of her awareness was a small cut, and there were many cuts, but fewer than there might have been. The dead drew closer. Snowstorms came more often now, sudden whiteouts that blotted out the world. Sansa could feel an intelligence in some of them, a directed malice. The Night Kings were moving through wind and ice. She countered as best she could. When a white storm rose over the Wolfswood, she called to the trees, not in words but in feeling. Hold, bend, break the wind. The ancient pines creaked, their branches shifting. Snow that would have driven into men's faces instead fell in eddies. Visibility improved just enough. When frost wolves made of snow and hate hunted a band of returning rangers, she flung her awareness outward, searching for other wolves nearby. She found a small pack, starving, ribs hollow. She sent them hunger and fury and the scent of the frost wolves as prey. The living wolves hurled themselves into the unnatural pack. Teeth met not flesh but something stranger, yet the magic of the Wolf Kingdom made a difference. Where Fong met frost, some of the Night King's constructs faltered, fell apart in a flurry of snow. For rangers still died. 6 lived who would not have. The land became a battlefield long before the dead appeared on any horizon. And through it all, Sansa held Winterfell. She did not stand on battlements with sword in hand like Arya might have, or ride with the vanguard like Robb. That was not her strength. She directed, she decided. She listened to the murmurs of the land and turned them into orders on parchment, into lines on maps, into movements of men and wolves and food. Brienne watched her, silent and steadfast. Once, on a rare quiet moment, she said, "You were born for this. Sansa laughed, though there was little humor in it. "No one is born for this," she said. "But I survived what I was not born for. This I chose." Brienne looked at her with something like reverence, something like worry. "Don't let it take you," the knight said softly. "You're more than this magic. You're Sansa. Don't forget." Sansa thought of Jane Poole, lost in the snow, of Miranda's dogs, of Lisa Arryn falling screaming through the moon door, of kneeling on cold stone in the throne room while the court laughed at her father's head. "I won't," she said. "I know too well what happens when people become only the roles the world gives them." Yet at night, when she lay in her bed, she could feel the wolf voices tugging at her. "Run," they whispered. "Hunt, tear, howl." Sometimes she rose quietly, dressed in furs, and slipped out into the godswood with Lady. Together, woman and wolf ran along the paths between trees, their breaths steaming in the cold, their hearts beating in rhythm. For a little while, she did not think of maps or grain or dead men. She thought only of snow under her boots, wind in her hair, the joy of movement. Those were the nights that kept her human. The dead reached Last Hearth on a night of no moon. Sansa felt the shock of it like a blade twisting in her guts. The umber seat should, deared in her awareness, its warm fires snuffed out one by one. Lives winked away, leaving cold behind. She was in council, arguing with Royce over whether to send another detachment of archers to the eastern flank. When it hit, she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the table. "My lady!" Wolkan cried, reaching for her. "Last Hearth," she gasped. There, the dead. They've." She didn't need to finish. The council chamber grew very quiet. "The Umbers," Lady Manderly whispered. "All of them." Sansa closed her eyes. She saw the great hall of Last Hearth, its walls hung with shields and antlers. She saw men fighting, swords flashing, arrows hissing. She saw children herded toward hidden passages that didn't stay hidden long enough. She saw blue eyes opening in faces she had known only from letters and feasts. Not all, she thought desperately. Not all. A few flickers of warmth remained, moving quickly away from the hall, toward the woods. "How many?" Royce asked, voice rough. "A handful," Sansa said. "Maybe less." She opened her eyes, bracing herself on the table. "They're coming," she said. "No more time for doubt, no more time for slow preparations. We move the last of the people south. We empty every small holdfast between Last Hearth and here. We draw the line at Winterfell. You'd abandon them?" a Karstark man demanded. "Our lands, our halls?" "I would trade every stone between here and the wall for one living child," Sansa snapped. "You want your halls back? Survive this winter and you can rebuild. You die, and the dead will wear your banners into battle." He flinched, subdued. "It will be chaos," Wolkan said nervously. "Floods of people on the roads. We don't have enough carts. Enough food." "We'll make it enough," Sansa said. Her head throbbed with the cries of the dying. She pushed the pain aside, turning it into sharp focus. "We group them, families first, children, the old, fighters last. Every able-bodied man and woman not escorting refugees digs trenches, raises stakes, fortifies. We turn Winterfell into a trap that even the dead will choke on. And after," Glover asked quietly, "if we hold, then we see if our dragons arrive," Sansa said. "Or if the North keeps its promises alone." She did not know, she realized. Jon had sent ravens, had pledged to come, but time and distance and war might have eaten his words. Dragons might never darken the sky above Winterfell. We still stand, she thought, with or without them. They worked like people running in a dream where their legs never slowed. The next days blurred into a frenzy. Sansa slept little, ate when she remembered. She watched lines move on maps and felt lives move across the land. Refugees flooded into Winterfell. Farmers with their worldly goods piled on sledges. Children clinging to goats. Old men leaning on staffs. Their fear battered at her from all sides, a constant wave. She used the magic where she could. When panic threatened to turn to riot at the gates, she sent a calming pulse through the crowd, a memory of warm hearths and full bellies. It worked for some, not all, but enough to keep knives in sheaths. When a group of men tried to force their way into the storerooms, she felt the wrongness of their intent like a sour note. She sent wolves instead of guards. The sight of gray shapes slinking from the shadows, teeth bared, cooled their courage. They dropped the sacks and fled. She did not take away their fear entirely. Fear could be useful. Kept in check, it made people careful. Pushed too far, it made them brittle. She walked a line. Meanwhile, Winterfell transformed. Trenches were dug beyond the walls, their bottoms lined with stakes and slicked with water that froze into treacherous glass. Pits were filled with oil and covered with light snow, ready to be set alight. Wooden barriers went up, not just as obstacles but as channels, funneling any advancing army into kill zones covered by archers. Tar was poured along the battlements, ready to be ignited and poured on climbing dead. Cauldrons were filled, not with boiling oil. They could not spare it, but with heated sand and stones, weapons crueler than steel when poured on flesh or frozen bone. The blacksmiths of the north worked day and night, turning every scrap of metal they could find into weapons. They had little dragonglass, less than Jon had promised, but what they had went into spear tips and arrowheads, blades for a chosen few. Sansa assigned those carefully to men and women who would do the most with them. The best archers, the most experienced warriors. She did not trust chance. All the while, the cold pressed closer. She could feel the dead now as a constant ache. They moved faster than mortal armies, heedless of fatigue, of supply, of fear. The land groaned under them. Bran sat beneath the heart tree for hours, eyes white, mind far away. Arya appeared one day in the yard like a wraith, face thinner, eyes harder. She slid between shadows as easily as breathing. She watched Sansa from doorways, from rooftops, with a look that was half suspicion, half something like pride. "You've changed," Arya said bluntly one evening, appearing in Sansa's solar without knocking. "We all have," Sansa said. Arya tilted her head. "You smell like snow and wet dog." Sansa almost laughed. "Better than roses and fear." Arya smiled, sharp and quick. "I heard you howled in the yard." "I did. And the wolves came." "They did." Arya's eyes glittered. "Good." They stood together in silence for a moment, two sisters who had been girl and ghost and stranger to each other and were now something like a pack. "Will you fight?" Sansa asked. "What else is there?" Arya said. "I didn't learn what I learned to sit in a tower and watch other people die for me." "Someone has to survive," Sansa said quietly. "Someone has to remember, to rebuild." "Then you survive," Arya said. "You like ruling. You're good at it. I'll kill Thin." "Yes." Sansa wanted to argue, to tell her that she was more than her blade, more than the ghost she carried. But she remembered how stifled she had felt in King's Landing, when others had told her what she should be, what was best. She would not do that to Arya. Not now. "We both live," Sansa said instead. "We both remember." "How's that?" Arya's smile softened, just for a heartbeat. "Deal," she said. The night the dead reached Winterfell, the world held its breath. The air was so cold it burned. The stars were hard points, tiny shards of ice in a black sky. The snow had stopped, but it lay thick on the ground, crunching under boots. Torches burned along the walls, their small flames defiant against the dark. Fires outside the walls flickered in trenches and pits, a ring of man-made light. Sansa stood on the battlements, cloaked in gray and white, the fur-lined hood drawn back so all could see her face. Lady stood beside her, head level with her waist. Below, in the yard and beyond the walls, men and women waited in ranks. Some shivered, from cold or fear or both. Others stood very still. Banners fluttered. The dire wolf of Stark, the merman of Manderley, the flayed man now scrubbed and overpainted with a gray wolf, the pine and axe of Glover. They were not many compared to armies of old wars, but they were all the North could raise. Brienne stood near the gate, helmet on, sword in hand. Arya was nowhere to be seen, which meant she was exactly where she needed to be. Bran waited in the Godswood, the weirwood's roots wrapped around him. He had insisted on being there. "I need to see," he had said. "Whatever happens, I have to see it." Sansa had wanted to keep him somewhere safer. Then she had realized there was no such place anymore. The safest place for him was where he could do the most good. A horn sounded on the outer wall. 3 long blasts. The dead, that old signal said. The White Walkers. The sound rolled across the yard, almost swallowed by the night. Silence followed. Then, from the dark beyond the furthest fires, a faint crunching. They heard the dead before they saw them. Thousands of feet on snow, an endless, muffled drum. Sansa closed her eyes. She could feel them now more clearly than ever. The air around them was a void, sucking heat and life away. Where they passed, the land withdrew, huddling in on itself. Trees shrank back. The very stones seemed to cringe. She opened her eyes. They emerged from the dark like a tide. Whites at the front, stumbling and loping and crawling. Men and women, children, giants, all twisted by death and cold. Their eyes glowed, their fingers clawed. Behind them came more monstrous shapes. Frost wolves, their forms indistinct, flickering. Things that had once been bears, now skeletons wrapped in frost. Shadows that moved with no bodies to cast them. And behind them, looming on skeletal steeds, rode the White Walkers. There were fewer of them than Sansa had feared. 24 perhaps. But each radiated a cold that made the whites around them seem almost warm. At their center rode the Night King. He drew rein at the edge of the firelight. For a long moment, everything was still. Sansa felt his gaze search the walls, the yard, the land itself. It was like a knife of ice sliding over her skin. Then it stopped. On her. He could feel her, she realized. The Wolf Kingdom's binding was not invisible to him. He recognized power even if it was not his kind. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the line between them. He lifted one hand. The front ranks of the dead surged forward. "Archers," Sansa said. The command rippled down the wall. Arrows flew. Some were dragonglass-dipped, glittering black. They punched through rotting flesh, through skulls, through blue eyes. Whites that were struck went down and did not rise. Others were simple steel. They slowed the tide, pinning limbs, turning strides into crawls. They did not stop it. The first wave hit the outer defenses like a black tide. They tumbled into the trenches, onto the stakes. They did not cry out. They impaled themselves and climbed over their fellows, heedless of torn flesh. Sansa had seen battle before from balconies and windows. This was different. She could feel every impact, every arrow, every sword stroke. The Wolf Kingdom made her a net, and everything that touched the north tugged at that net. It was almost too much, but she could not flinch away. If she did, the lines would tangle and everything would fall apart. "Light them," she said through gritted teeth. Torches rose. Flaming arrows arced. The trenches ignited. Fire roared up, bright and sudden. Oil-caught wood crackled. Whites already in the trenches burned, thrashing. Those behind pushed forward anyway, heedless, falling into the flames. The heat washed over the walls, a brief relief from the cold. Sansa felt the dead recoil, not from fear but from simple physics. Fire slowed them. It did not turn them aside entirely, but it made them clamber over charred bodies instead of flowing smoothly. She used that. "Push flank left," she murmured, not to any one person but to the land itself. "Make them bunch there." The wind shifted. The least hint of a slope in the ground pressed under the dead's feet. Inches, no more, but enough that their mass drifted slightly to the left. Royce, watching from his position, saw it and barked orders. A volley of dragonglass arrows rained down on that packed cluster, dropping dozens. It was like fighting through a veil. Sansa could not swing a sword, but she could see patterns. Currents in the tide of the dead, eddies where pressure built. She could nudge things. A gust of wind, a patch of slippery ice, the sudden collapse of a partially frozen ditch. Each small change saved a life here, cost a life there. She tried to balance the ledger, knowing she never truly could. The White Walkers moved slowly, like generals watching their troops test a fortress. The Night King sat his horse like a statue. When the first line of outer defenses was choked with charred bodies and burned-out pits, he lifted his hand again. A wind rose, the fires guttered. Sansa felt the night lean in. The flames burned blue for a moment, then died, smoke rising in thin, twisted lines. He snuffed them out, she thought, sickened. Just like that, the dead surged forward over the blackened ground. "Get ready," Brienne shouted. "Shields, lances." The main impact hit Winterfell's outer line like a hammer. Men fought, spears thrust, swords swung. Wolves flung themselves at frostborn beasts and whites alike, teeth clamping on dead flesh. They bought time with their lives, snarling even as claws and icy talons tore them. Lady was everywhere at once. Sansa saw through her eyes for a moment, the world a whirl of scent and motion, the taste of cold rot, the feel of bones crunching under her jaws. She tore the legs from a frost wolf, leaped away from snapping jaws, hurled herself at a white reaching for a child. For a dangerous heartbeat, Sansa lost herself in that fury. She wanted to kill, to tear and tear and tear until nothing moved. A scream pulled her back, human this time. One of her archers had lost his footing, fallen from the wall. He landed badly in the yard, leg snapping. Whites surged toward him, drawn by the fresh, bright heat of living blood. No. Sansa slammed that thought outward. The Wolf Kingdom answered. Wolves turned as one. 3 peeled away from their current fights, sprinting for the fallen man. One leaped, slamming into the first white. Another ripped the second's arm off. The third snarled, snapping at a third's throat. Brienne appeared a heartbeat later, sword flashing, cutting down the remaining dead. She grabbed the fallen archer, hauling him toward the inner gate. The man lived, because she had seen him, because she had chosen. How many don't I see? Sansa thought, almost dizzy. How many die in the corners of this night? The land under her feet thrummed, reminding her that for every saved life, a dozen more flickered out beyond her reach. She could not hold them all. No one could. The White Walkers advanced. They moved more slowly than the Whites, deliberately. One raised its hand. A spear of blue-white ice formed in its grip, sharp as thought. It hurled the spear at the battlements. Sansa flinched as the spear passed through the space where she stood. It struck a man 2 paces down, punching through his chest and the stone behind him. The man sagged, pinned, eyes wide. His life went out like a candle. "Down!" Brienne shouted from below. "Get her down!" But Sansa shook her head. Her place was here. If she descended, she would feel no less, see no less. At least here she could watch the flow of battle. The Night King watched her still. She could feel his attention like frost on skin. "You see me," she thought. Good. She was not a dragon queen with fire at her command. She could not call lightning or break the sky. But she was the North. She turned her eyes to the Godswood. Bran sat under the heart tree, its branches stark and red. Through their bond, she could feel his mind stretched far, touching ravens, wolves, perhaps even the dead themselves. He saw more of the field than any of them. "Help me," she whispered, not aloud but along the threads between them. "If we are to survive, help me." For a moment, nothing. Then the roots of the heart tree stirred. Winterfell had stood for thousands of years. Stones had been laid, walls raised, halls rebuilt and burned and rebuilt again. Through it all, the Godswood had remained, its trees sinking roots deep into the earth. Those roots now woke. Sansa felt them shift, a great slow movement under the ground. Beneath the feet of the dead, under the packed snow and the shattered bodies, roots thick as a man's torso twisted. They were not just from the heart tree. They were from older, deeper things, echoes of the forests that had once covered this whole land. They lunged upward. The earth cracked, throwing whites off their feet. Roots speared through rotting flesh, wrapping around bones. They did not feel pain, but they were slowed, entangled. Some roots coiled around the legs of frost wolves, dragging them down. Others lashed at the limbs of white walkers, leaving streaks of ice where they touched. The walkers recoiled, not in fear but in surprise. Their cold was not supreme here. The land fought back. The Night King tilted his head, as if considering. Then he extended one hand. Frost crackled along the ground, racing across roots and stone. Where it touched, roots would blackened, split. Bark split with tiny screams that only Sansa could hear. She cried out, clutching at her chest as if the blow had struck her there. "Stop!" she gasped. "You'll kill the godswood." Bran's mind brushed hers, cool and distant. "Some will die," he said. "Not all. Not if we're careful." The roots withdrew from the direct chill, pulling back, coiling in pockets of earth where the frost could not reach as easily. They did not retreat entirely. They shifted, changed tactics. Sansa could feel Bran guiding them. His awareness spread like a net under the ground. She added her will to his, focusing. Not everywhere, she thought. Here and here. She pictured choke points, places where the dead needed to cluster, to climb, to push, to advance. Roots obeyed. They burst from the ground in those key spots, forming tangles and walls. The dead were forced to clamber over them in tight clusters, and there the dragonglass arrows fell thickest. It was not enough to stop the tide, but it made the Night King work for every inch. Snow began to fall again. Thin, fine flakes, swirling. They thickened quickly, driven by a wind that rose from nowhere. The world turned white. For a moment, Sansa could see nothing. The dead vanished. The living became shadows. She reached for the Wolf Kingdom. Do not let them be BLI. Dead, she thought fiercely. Let them see as wolves see. She pushed that sensation. The way Lady moved through a snowstorm, guided by scent and subtle differences in shadow outward. Men blinked, squinting. The white haze was still thick, but edges sharpened. White's movements were easier to distinguish, their unnatural motions standing out. The storm was the Night King's doing, she knew. But visibility was not only his to grant or deny. He felt her interference. She sensed the flicker of irritation in the cold that radiated from him. Good, she thought again. The dead pressed on. Despite the fire, despite the roots, despite the arrows and spears, they gained ground. They always gained ground. For every one that fell, another climbed over its body. They reached the walls. Whites threw themselves against stone, clawing, climbing, forming living ladders. Others hurled themselves into the remaining pits and ditches, filling them so those behind could cross more easily. Defenders on the walls hacked at grasping hands, kicked bodies away. The air was full of the smell of rot and frost and blood. A white reached the parapet near Sansa, fingers hooking over the edge. His eyes burned. His hair was frozen into spikes. It hauled itself up with inhuman strength. Sansa stepped back, heart racing. She had no weapon, no training. Lady was faster. She lunged, jaws closing on the white's neck. Rotten flesh tore, bones cracked. She yanked, dragging the corpse back and flinging it into the darkness. Sansa panted, hand pressed to the cold stone. You cannot break, she told herself. Not now. Not in front of them. She straightened. Below, in the yard, the inner line held. For now. Brienne fought like a bright shard of steel, cutting down whites that broke through. Arya slipped through shadows, appearing where she was needed most, her small blade flashing with deadly precision. Gendry's hammer rose and fell. The Hound, cursing and muttering, swung his great sword with savage efficiency, fear of fire overridden by the greater horror before them. Wolves darted among human fighters, bringing down whites at knees and ankles, knocking them off balance for blades to finish. It was a dance, a nightmare. Sansa watched lines shift, men fall, gaps open and close. Her mind moved faster than her body ever could have, seeing patterns, possibilities. There, she thought, seeing a group of men beginning to falter under a particularly dense cluster of whites. She reached for a nearby pack of wolves, sent them a jolt of urgency and scent. They veered, slamming into the White's flank. There, another front where the dead were climbing with dismaying ease. She called to the roots, had them twist sharply under the weight, throwing the front rank of Whites off balance so a line of spearmen could thrust down. It was not enough. It was never enough. And still the Night King watched. He had not moved much. He sat his horse on a rise of snow, his blue eyes fixed on Winterfell as if it were an interesting puzzle rather than a fortress full of screaming, sweating, bleeding people. He raised his hand again. The dead who had fallen within the last hour. Men who had died with swords in hand. Wolves who had gone down under claw and blade shuddered. Sansa felt it like a cold hand closing around her heart. "No," she whispered. They rose. A Stark man who had died defending the gate turned, his eyes now blue. He swung his sword at his former comrades. A wolf whose guts had spilled onto the snow climbed to its feet again, intestines dragging, its howl twisted. The men facing them hesitated, horror etched on their faces. Sansa's stomach turned. She had known he could do this. Knowing and seeing were different. He will wear us, she thought, dazed. Our dead will fight us. Every life we spend becomes a weapon in his hand. Unless the thought came like a spark. The wolf kingdom bound the living. Blood to snow, snow to bone. But the dead were still made of bone and flesh and the land's memory. There were threads there, too. Different, colder. But threads. What if those threads could be cut? She focused. The newly risen dead glowed in her awareness. Not warm like the living, but not as cold as those who had walked long in death. Their ties to the world were fresh, their bond to the Night King not yet fully hardened. She reached for one. It was like touching ice that burned and bit at her metaphysical fingers. Hatred surged along the line, a 1,000-year chill older than any human grudge. She pushed back. "You are not his," she thought fiercely. "You are ours. You died for the North. You will not kill it." The line wavered. The dead man she reached for, the Stark soldier at the gate, stumbled. His blue eyes flickered, for a heartbeat tinged with the faintest hint of the brown they had once been. The Night King's attention sharpened. An icy spike. He pulled. Sansa pulled harder. For a moment, she and the Night King fought over that one soul like dogs over a bone. The strain made her head pound, her vision blur. Then she felt something snap. The line between the dead man and the Night King broke. The man froze. His sword dropped from his hand. He sagged to his knees. The light went out of his eyes. The blue extinguished. He did not rise again. Sansa gasped, staggering against the battlements. It worked. She looked for another and another. Each time she found that flicker of new blue, that fresher link, she seized it. Some she could cut. Others slipped away, his presence there stronger, colder. He felt her with each attempt. The Night King's gaze locked on her. The cold in it was beyond anything winter could summon. It was the emptiness between stars, the chill of centuries of anger. He raised his hand again. This time, the wind that rose was not just snow and ice. Carried something sharper. The Wolf Kingdom's lines shuddered. Sansa felt the bonds she had woven tremble. Connections she had taken for granted, the sense of a small village's hearths, the hum of wolves in the wolfswood, flickered. He was not just raising his own dead. He was prying at her magic. He seeks to break the pack, she realized. She gritted her teeth and poured herself into the bonds, willing them to hold. Pack, she thought. Remember who you are. Faces flashed through her mind. Children laughing in a white harbor street while snow fell. A farmer teaching his son to reset a snare. Gendry sweating in the forge. Arya's blade gleaming. Brienne's steady eyes. They were her pack now, whether they knew it or not. She anchored herself in them. In their memories, their stubbornness, their ridiculous hopes. The Wolf Kingdom steadied. The Night King's will met hers, cold against warmth. For long, shuddering heartbeats, they contested. He had had centuries to hone his craft. His power was vast and singular, a monolith of ice. Hers was younger, woven of many threads. Human and wolf, land and memory, love and rage. Singular power was simpler. It did not compromise, but it could crack. His will drove hard at one point, trying to spear through. She spread hers wide, a net instead of a lance. He chipped away at one line. She reinforced another. Where he tried to turn a wolf's heart cold, she flooded it with the remembered warmth of littermate's fur. Where he tried to still a man's courage, she filled his mind with the sound of his child's laughter. She could not stop him everywhere, but she could blunt him. He realized that she saw. He understood that this would not be won in a single stroke. His gaze left her. He looked past Winterfell, past the walls and the fires, to the Godswood, to Bran. Sansa felt the shift like a knife. No, she whispered. If he took Bran, if he killed whatever the three-eyed raven truly was, the past itself would shudder. The memories that gave people identity and meaning would warp. She could not let that happen. Brienne, she shouted down, voice raw. Arya, the Godswood. He's going for Bran. Even as she shouted, the Night King moved. He nudged his skeletal steed forward. Whites parted before him, making a corridor. Frost wolves slunk at his sides. He did not hurry. He did not need to. The tide of dead around Winterfell surged anew, pressing the defenders, making them turn inward, away from the Godswood. He'll carve a path, Sansa realized. He'll walk through our blood to the heart tree. She had to stop him. Dragonglass arrows flew toward him, loosed by the best archers. He did not even raise a hand this time. The air around him shimmered. The arrows shuddered, slowed, and fell, their momentum stolen. Sansa's heart pounded. She could not reach him with steel. She did not have dragons. What she had was the North. She closed her eyes. The world opened. Not just Winterfell now, but everything. Every tree, every hill, every stone. Every wolf. Every remembered battle. Every oath sworn under starlight. She felt the echoes of old wars. The long night of legend, when the first men and the children had stood together against the dark. She felt the Wolf Queen's first binding, raw and new. She felt Torrhen kneeling to Aegon, choosing survival over pride. She felt her father's head fall, Robb's blood soak a wedding floor, Jon's hand leaving hers as he rode south. Always, Starks had stood at the line between winter and the rest of the world. Sometimes they had won, sometimes they had died, but they had always stood. Sansa reached for that. Not any one Stark, not any one king. The whole line. She called them. Not their ghosts, the dead were the Night King's province, but their memories, their choices, their stubbornness. Blood to snow, she thought fiercely. Snow to bone, bone to root, root to heart, heart to howl. Her awareness plunged down, through snow and stone, through roots and bones and the bedrock of the North. Something answered. It was not a voice, not exactly. It was a feeling, like hands on her shoulders, steadying, like the weight of a cloak being laid over her, heavy and right. The land surged. The snow around Winterfell's walls shuddered. It rose, not in the Night King's cold, swirling way, but in great heaving mounds. Shapes emerged. They were wolves, but no wolf had ever been so big. Their forms were made of snow and shadow, their fur the white of blizzards, their eyes the gray of storm clouds. They were not frost wolves like those the Night King called. They were something older. The idea of wolves, the memory of every wolf that had ever lived and died in the North. They shook themselves, snow sprang. The dead around them hesitated, even those who did not feel fear. Some old instinct made their bones remember. The Night King reined in his horse, head tilting. The snow wolves howled. The sound was terrible and beautiful, rippling across the battlefield. It was the echo of every wolf song ever sung in these lands, from the first to the last. They hurled themselves at the dead. Where the Night King's constructs were sharp and cold, these wolves were soft and crushing. They didn't tear. They smothered. They leaped into masses of whites, their bodies dissolving into snow that still somehow pressed, crushed, buried. Whites were pulled down, packed under layers of snow and shadow. It did not destroy them entirely. Sansa could still feel their cold, but it immobilized many, turned the tide in places where the living were near to breaking. The White Walkers tried to freeze the wolves, to turn their snow to brittle ice, but every time they hardened a wolf, it shattered and then reformed, flowing back together. The Night King watched, eyes narrowed. This was new even to him. He lifted his hand, focusing. A wind howled, rivaling the wolf's song. The temperature dropped further, beyond what any human should endure. Frost crawled across stone and flesh alike. The snow wolves faltered, parts of them frozen in place. They moved more sluggishly. This was a battle of winters, Sansa realized. His and hers. She poured more of herself into the wolves. Each one was a drain, a thread of her will and the land's. She could feel her strength bleeding out, but there was so much land to draw from, so many hearts, so many memories. The wolves surged again. "Lady," Sansa whispered. The dire wolf beside her lifted her head. "Go," Sansa said. "Protect Bran." Lady did not hesitate. She turned and ran, leaping from stair to stair with impossible grace, heading for the Godswood. Sansa watched her go, her heart riding every stride. The Night King's head turned slightly, tracking that gray blur. Too late, she thought. You'll be too late. She felt him make his move. He dismounted. The skeletal horse crumbled under him, its bones falling apart into a heap of frozen shards. He landed lightly on the snow, spear in his hand. He walked toward the Godswood. Whites parted before him, making a path. Through that path, snow wolves strained, but his cold pressed them back, their forms crumbling where he walked. Sansa could have tried to stop him head-on, could have poured everything into one giant wolf, one massive wall of snow and root and bone in his way. He would have broken it. Instead, she did something else. She withdrew. Not from the battlefield entirely. People still fought, still died. She kept just enough of herself there to maintain the wolves, the roots, the bonds. The rest of her she pulled inward, into Winterfell's heart, into the Godswood, into the roots of the heart tree where Bran sat. He felt her arrive. "You're late," he said, but there was a hint of wryness in the thought. "There are a lot of demands on my time," she replied, breathless. Together, they watched the Night King approach. He stepped into the Godswood. Snow crunched under his feet. The trees shivered. The heart tree watched him with bleeding eyes. Bran sat beneath it, still and small. Lady reached them a moment later, bursting through the undergrowth, fur bristling. She placed herself between Bran and the Night King, teeth bared. The Night King regarded her for a heartbeat, then raised his spear. "Bran," Sansa thought sharply. Now, Bran rose. He didn't stand. His legs were useless still, but in another sense. Error in message stream. Retry.